Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Stephen King Cast, one man's musings on the works of Stephen King. Each week, I review one entry in the bibliography of Stephen King in the chronological order of publication. And today, I'm not talking about one of Stephen King's written works. What I'm going to be doing is discussing my thoughts on the latest Stephen King adaptation, which is The Running Man, which just came out in November and hit streaming, or at least on demand, a couple weeks ago. So I recently checked it out, and I wanted to share my thoughts on that with all of you. So those of you who are listening right now, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. New listeners, welcome to the Stephen King Cast. Here's a brief overview. Back in 2013-ish, I was looking for a Stephen King podcast, and I could not really find any. And so I thought long and hard about whether or not I should create the type of podcast that I myself would like to listen to. And then in the summer of 2014, I was able to launch this podcast, which the original mission statement was to review each Stephen King novel and short story and novella in the chronological order of publication, and really dive into the characters and the themes and the effectiveness of what Stephen King was, intending to do with that particular text. And then attach it to the larger themes, looking at Stephen King across the decades about what he was working with during a particular era, during a particular point in time, and what he was working through, what his perspective might have been on the world, how that's reflected within the text, how each text relates to the one preceding and the one that comes after, or maybe something that might connect thematically across the decades. And then I dove into the more literal connections with how the Stephen King characters and towns and events interact with one another, and how they all relate to the Dark Tower saga. So there's a lot there. If you are tuning in for the first time, you can go back and start making your way through the catalog that's available for everyone. And for everyone that has been with me since the beginning, or have been with me, jumped on somewhere within this 10 plus years, thank you always for being there and for being a constant listener as we make our way through this shared fandom of Stephen King. And then what I'm going to be doing today, I'm just going to be talking about The Running Man. I'll share a listener email, and when it comes to emails, I don't like doing this alone. So if you have any thoughts on The Running Man, on Edgar Wright, on any of the adaptations, if you have any thoughts on Stephen King in the year 2025, or anything related to Stephen King that you want to share, just write into stephenkingcast@yahoo.com. And if you have not done so already, a review on iTunes would help me out greatly. Some plans that I have in store for 2026, as we get into the spring and the summer, I would like to start to migrate over onto YouTube and Spotify as well, and start going into my back catalog and maybe doing some updates, and then re-releasing with some additional thoughts, as well as trying to stay on top of current Stephen King events as well. So there's, I hope that the year 2026 is a resurgence of this podcast. And so for those of you who have been listening for a long time, I hope to get back into the swing of things more regularly. And for those of you joining for the first time, there's hopefully a lot to look forward to as we continue to make our way into 2026. All right, so the first thing I want to do is read an email from Brett, and Brett writes, "Hey again, and Stephen, I like this. Hey again, and Stephen's greetings. Loved listening to your thoughts on the final 2 episodes of Welcome to Derry, and I thought I would share a few of my own. First up, a mea culpa after my last email, where I was holding out hope that the military angle could amount to something." So I'm going to interject now. So spoiler alert for the events of It, Welcome to Derry. If you have not seen this HBO show, you might want to cry off now and come back later, because we're going to talk a little bit about the concluding episode of the first season of It, Welcome to Derry. And if you have not listened to any of my reviews, I have touched upon each one of the episodes. I discussed the first 3 episodes, then the second 3 episodes, and then the final 2 episodes in different episodes on this show. So you can go back just a couple weeks worth and get what you need there if you want to get my thoughts on It, Welcome to Derry. So back to Brett, who writes, like I said last time, I've always felt that whether it's the book, the miniseries, or the film, the times before the Losers Club adventures inexplicably had far more gruesome beginnings and endings to their cycles. And I figured that maybe the military did something to cause that. As much as I like to be done with that part of the story, I'm afraid we'll have to contend with 1935 Francis Shaw trying to figure out why his whole silly stunt would work. While I agree wholeheartedly that one of the biggest problems of the show was that it was answering questions that most fans of the novel were never asking, I have to admit that I really enjoyed the 1908 segment of episode 7 and seeing Bill Skarsgård as Bob Gray. It is often said that his Pennywise is too creepy to draw kids in, but Skarsgård's clowning performances were fantastic, if melancholic. One problem I had with this first season was a sense of time. The children parts of the book and movie take place over a whole summer with ebbs and flows. Aside from the first episode of the series, this whole thing takes place in just a few weeks. Aside from the flashbacks and flash forwards, the last 3 episodes take place over a few days, and even Marge's eulogy said she only knew Rich for a month. I feel this contributes to the rushed nature of the show, where despite having 8 hours, nothing is given time to just breathe. I have other nitpicks. Introducing an all-important dead tree halfway into the finale, the once Lovecraftian deadlights seemingly have no ill effects on a whole school of kids, etc. I'm definitely curious for season 2, and will be rushing to hear your thoughts once that releases, and I will cover it. If this world is still standing when that comes around, I will definitely cover it. And yeah, Brett, I agree with a lot of that, and even though I did not like the Bob Gray subplot, being able to see Skarsgård modulate his performance to portray a human version of the character was definitely interesting. Though I didn't like the voice. I wish that he did a more normal voice. And I understand that really Pennywise is taking all of the personality of this particular performer, but I didn't like how performative the voice was from an acting standpoint. But that could just be me. Side note, you're far from the first person to think that I might be the other Brett McKenzie. So going back a few episodes, Brett wrote in, and I said that I'm just going to believe that this is Brett McKenzie from Flight of the Conchords, and so Brett is talking about this. So you're far from the first person to think that I might be that other Brett McKenzie. A good portion of my Twitter followers must think I'm him, since I live in New York City, a city where celebrity encounters are relatively common. I've disappointed my fair share of people, including the staff of an Apple Store Genius Bar when I showed up for an appointment. It's pretty funny. Okay, now we're going to turn our attention toward The Running Man. So before I get into my thoughts on this recent adaptation, I would like us to have a basis of understanding, so I'm going to read from the Wikipedia summary. In the near future, the United States is ruled by an authoritarian media network referred to simply as the network. Most viewers live in poverty, with little access to health care, and the network placates the masses with trashy, violent game shows and reality television. The most popular program is The Running Man, where runners can win $1 billion by surviving 30 days, while the network's 5 hunters, led by the mysterious Evan McCone, as well as ordinary citizens, try to find and kill them. Given $1,000 and a 12-hour head start, runners are required to film themselves every day or else forfeit their earnings but still be hunted. Ben Richards, a blue-collar worker in the slums of Co-op City, is unable to afford flu medicine for his infant daughter, Kathy, after being blacklisted for union activism. Ben tries out for the network, intending to join a less dangerous show, but is unexpectedly chosen for The Running Man, along with Tim Jansky and Jenny Laughlin. Executive producer Dan Killian convinces Ben to join by offering him a safe house for his family and an advance for Kathy's medication. As the hunt begins, Ben travels to New York City. Checking into a hotel in disguise, Ben watches the live feed of hunters killing Tim. He flees to Boston. In Boston, the hunters and soldiers track Ben to a hostel and shoot at him, leading to an explosion that kills 8 soldiers. Anti-network activist Bradley Throckmorton shelters Ben at his home, attempting to expose the network's propaganda and deceit. Ben sends a video denouncing their actions, but the broadcast content is replaced with a foul-mouthed deepfake of Ben angering the public, including Bradley's mother, who kicks him out of the house. Bradley sends Ben to Derry, Maine, to meet Elton Parakis, a fellow activist who prepares to lead Ben to a bunker for the remainder of his run. Ben stops Elton's mother from alerting the authorities, but Elton does so anyway, dispatching them with booby traps to avenge his father. Ben and Elton flee in a buggy, but McCone kills Elton. Ben crashes the buggy into another hunter on the bridge and escapes into the river below. Jenny is killed, leaving Ben as the sole remaining contestant, while his survival has earned the support of the poor and the working class. Traveling north, Ben discovers that a land development has paved over the bunker. Escaping surveillance drones, he commandeers a passing car and takes the wealthy driver Amelia Williams hostage. Amelia realizes the truth about the network's propaganda after seeing televised deepfakes of herself and agrees to help Ben. Reaching an airfield, they take off in a jet to Canada, guarded by McCone. Killian calls to offer Ben his own show as the network's newest hunter. If he kills McCone and the remaining hunters, broadcast footage of them murdering Sheila and Kathy to drum up support for Ben. Ben kills the hunters posing as the flight crew, and McCone reveals himself as a former runner who took Killian's deal after nearly winning the first season. Killing McCone, Ben sends Amelia to safety with a parachute and Elton's revolutionary pamphlets. Killian gives Ben the chance to accept his new show on live TV, but Ben instead pleads for viewers to hunt down Killian and his fellow executives. The network redirects the jet to their headquarters, airing a deep fake of Ben threatening to crash into the building, and the plane is shot down. Sometime later, Amelia recovers the plane's black box and leaks the uncensored recordings, turning the public against the network. Ben, who survived due to the plane's auto-eject function, has become the face of the revolution and reunites with his family, whose deaths were faked by Killian. As the next season of The Running Man begins, host Bobby Thompson senses the audience's hostility and quits, leaving Killian to host the show. A riot breaks out, and Ben emerges from the crowd and shoots Killian. Okay, so let me talk about my overall thoughts, but before I get to my overall thoughts, I just want to talk a little bit about the anticipation that I had heading into the release of this movie. So when I heard that Edgar Wright was taking this on, I got really excited. Now, if you have not seen any of Edgar Wright's films prior to The Running Man, you really should. So I fell in love with him and his sensibility and his style with Shaun of the Dead back in the early 2000s, which was followed shortly after by Hot Fuzz, and then later on it's called the Cornetto trilogy is wrapped up with World's End. I'm actually looking at a signed poster that I have of the World's End, not a poster but a print. Because I happen to really enjoy that movie as well. I think that it is the messiest of the Cornetto trilogy. The metaphor is not as strong as the previous two, but it's still, there's something that is still very, very potent and pure. And Simon Pegg's performance in it, him and Nick Frost kind of flipping character types in this movie, really, really works for me. And in that movie, you see Edgar Wright really demonstrating a level of choreographed fighting that at the time had gotten me really excited for him to take on Ant-Man, which ultimately did not work out, but he showed a visual flair for not, just comedy or action, which is evident when you watch Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz. But there was a real hand-to-hand choreography that got me really excited about Edgar Wright taking on more active movies. Now, by the time World's End came around, he had already done, um, Scott Pilgrim versus the World. I am not a fan of Scott Pilgrim. For me, it's a little too much. Um, I know that a lot of other people, really like it, and he's able to do a lot visually in terms of action with that movie. Uh, um, Baby Driver is another movie that I enjoy. I only saw once, but that the action within that movie also showed, that he really has potential, and he's got the chops for really providing a true action movie, which I had expected the Running Man to be. So I say all of this because I had full faith and still have full faith in Edgar Wright as a storyteller, as a director, as a writer, and as someone who is able to provide something new into the stories that he is telling while still pulling from the history of the genre that he's working in, whether it is zombies and the horror genre with Shaun of the Dead, whether it is action movies and, with Hot Fuzz, whether it is that sci-fi Invasion of the Body Snatchers styled movie, and Paranoia with World's End, or getaway movies with Baby Driver. Or suspense thrillers with Last Night in Soho. He's able to pull. With Last Night in Soho, a movie that I didn't talk about yet. I had listened to an interview with him where he was talking about how he spoke with the director of Poltergeist 3, a movie that dealt so much with mirrors and the technical challenges that came from having to film where mirrors are such an important part of the story, and that level of being able to dive into a catalog of cinema history and be able to pull out something that I think that Poltergeist 3 is not really talked about in the grand scheme of things. But that movie, I happen to like Poltergeist 3, but I completely understood why he would seek out the director of that movie. But him being a student of film, of film history, and being able to go in and pull out these elements from previous works to make something new, is just one of the reasons why I really like Edgar Wright. And so when I heard that he sought out the Running Man. This is something that he wanted to do, understanding that he has this kineticism and this talent for crafting action with with an adaptation that could go in a completely different direction than the previous adaptation, which was perfect for the 1980s. But now going back to something that where you could pull a little bit more from the original text while possibly telling something new that spoke to today, that got me really excited. And then hearing that he was able to cast Glen Powell in the role, who is this Glen Powell is someone who has the media on his side. He has the backing of Hollywood, who has kind of anointed him as the next movie star, capital M, capital S, to sort of take over for Tom Cruise, and Tom Cruise has kind of functioned as a mentor to him. So pairing Edgar Wright with Glen Powell in a movie where the concept itself, the running man, you're constantly running away from these threats. I was really, really very, very excited. I thought in the hands of Edgar Wright, where you received an open world adaptation of the book rather than the set confines of the Schwarzenegger version, more in line with the text but updated based on our current concepts of societal control, of segregation, of the haves and the have-nots, of poverty, and the role that entertainment plays in all of this. I was expecting a lot. I expected the trademarked kineticism, quick cut editing, visual callbacks to help define characterization, and the tight choreography that Edgar Wright is known for. I hoped for something that felt genuinely of the moment, of our moment in time. And I had hoped that the marriage between a successful, talented director and a movie star on the rise would result with something truly special that would resonate about today and the era that we find ourselves in. And I didn't get that. I didn't get what I wanted. And that's okay. So I would say if you're looking for a fun movie, yeah, you can check out The Running Man. It's fun. It's fine. But it also comes with the baggage of expecting something from Edgar Wright based on his previous works, and it's a curse and a blessing, because on one hand, it's kind of not fair for Edgar Wright, because you're expecting him to be able to deliver. I don't want to say masterpiece, but let's just say masterpiece after masterpiece after masterpiece. That's not fair to him. At the same time, he's got the goods, and so to not be able to deliver on what he has established for himself as a baseline level of expectation, I think also that falls within the realm of a totally appropriate level of criticism against the movie if someone has been able to demonstrate this understanding of story and action and do something new with it and use it to say something about today, or the characters, and then fail to live up to that expectation. It's only because he's been able to do it. So Shaun of the Dead, clearly, like he was able to utilize the zombie genre to tell this story of a man who is in a form of zombie purgatory himself, and his personal world, crumbling around him. His life was a metaphor for the zombie apocalypse, and he was able to use the visual stylings of a zombie apocalypse and a zombie story to tell the story of Shaun. And so I expected him to be able to take the concepts of The Running Man, of the book, and our understanding of that crossroads of politics and societal control with entertainment, and be able to tell something that spoke to us as a viewer in the year 2025, and we didn't get that. We didn't get that, and part of that is, I will say this in Edgar Wright's defense. I think that dystopian fiction is incredibly hard to pull off nowadays. We are living in a time where a lot of the events that you see within The Running Man it seems tame, and does not seem as outrageous enough as it has to be, in order to create this idea of a dystopian world. Watching a man on a hamster wheel, in The Running Man, in the movie, for cash, it doesn't seem that outrageous to me. Which I can understand that maybe that's the point, that he wanted to not present something so shocking, the way that Paul Verhoeven did with RoboCop. or the original Running Man did. Maybe he wanted to present something where it was a little bit more of our world, where a man running on a hamster wheel isn't so outrageous. But for me, I just found it a little bit tame, and I needed to have a little bit more teeth. But I would say that dystopian fiction is very very difficult. With the world that we are currently living in, where there is a lot of corruption, we are seeing a great divide between the haves and the have-nots. We are seeing life just be hard to survive, just to live. Living life right now is very difficult. The prices of everything are on the rise. Pharmaceutical companies have, our country in a chokehold. People's the quality of life is going down, and there are just lies being fed to mass audiences. Those in power have been able to take this idea of entertainment and infuse it into politics, so that marriage is there. If I was running for political office, my platform would be make politics boring again. Because right now every politician is a celebrity. There is a sports rivalry sensibility to politics now, where once upon a time, even though there was, always backdoor dealings and corruption, there was an idea where there were two parties who had different ideologies, but ultimately these two ideologies would work as counterbalances for the good of something called the United States of America. But now, those in power have been able to completely take control of the narrative and turn politics into sports, where you have now fans of two teams, and you root for your team no matter what, no matter the cost. And I don't know how you get back from that. But that idea of entertainment is baked into societal control at this point, in a way that to me is more insidious than anything depicted within the Running Man. Edgar Wright's The Running Man, and that's the challenge. That's the challenge of doing a dystopian piece of fiction. Much in the way, and this is kind of a go with me on this one. It's kind of a stretch. No, it's not a stretch, but see if you can see where I'm coming from here. Tron. Right, Disney every decade or so tries to make Tron relevant again, and wants to make the most out of this IP that it has. So 15 years ago, they had a Tron movie, and a couple months ago they just released Tron Ares, and both were not. It didn't really resonate with modern audiences, and I wasn't shocked to see that, because when Tron came out in the early 80s, which it's a movie about people entering a video game. Video games were still nascent, and they hadn't fully evolved into what video games are now. So this idea of this brightly colored neon world, with grids and these colorful lines and these motorcycles and everything, that all of that I can understand when the reality of video games hadn't fully emerged as a very recognizable foundational block of pop culture and existence, all throughout the 80s, 90s, 2000, and today, where it is a multi-billion-dollar not company, field. And I am now. I have, I grew up, with Nintendo. I grew up with Sega Genesis, and all the different PlayStations. I was there for the console wars, but I have now kind of aged out of my uh, finger on the pulse of video games, where there is just so many different ways to access what video games are now, whether it's through Steam, whether it's through apps, um, whether it's through uh, computer. Uh, Computer, gaming. There's just whether it's through the Oculus or VR. There's just there's so much um, that if I were given the reins of telling a movie about a video game, I don't think I would be the right person to do that because I don't know what I would be able to say about video games that hasn't been said already. Um, and so I say this because when they try to keep doing Tron, they are shackled to a shackled to the imagery of a movie that came out that predated our understanding of what video games wound up becoming. And in telling these stories with this imagery, um, it doesn't feel truthful to what video games are. It seems outdated, it seems obsolete. And I think that in telling a story about a dystopian future, where entertainment is the vehicle for societal control, and reality television um, dictates what reality is, and people go on these challenges to simply survive. I I just think that you have to have something new to say, because what Edgar Wright did was take so much from the original Richard Bachman text, which was novel in the early 80s or late 70s when it was written, because so much of what he was doing was predating the reality that we currently find ourselves in. When he writes it, reality television is not a thing. There are things as game shows, there are soap operas, there is professional wrestling, but there is not anything the way that there is now. Love Island doesn't exist. The Kardashians don't exist. Um, Love is Blind doesn't exist. Just whatever the reality show is, it doesn't exist. The Biggest Loser, what have you. Now, reality television is it permeates our culture, so much so that there wasn't anything that I saw within this adaptation that you don't see on Netflix. Speaking of Netflix, this is a very difficult adaptation to make in the wake of the massive phenomenon of Squid Game. I don't know if I were Edgar Wright, if I would want to make this if I knew that something along the lines of Squid Game had been made, where that need to put yourself in physical harm for the entertainment of billionaires, to simply get by. I don't know if in the shadow of that, if I would want to tell that story. And then you also have Black Mirror. Don't forget about Black Mirror. When it comes to dystopian fiction, what can you say about a world of technology? And technology plays a prevalent part of this movie, with whether it's the flying orbs that are just recording everything, the flying mailboxes, freebie. Technology is an important part of the vehicle for entertainment, but how do you go about telling something new and novel in the wake of all of Black Mirror, which even Black Mirror, even Charlie Booker, the more recent Black Mirror seasons have felt tame, not because there isn't um, not because the creativity has lagged, but our world has caught up to the dystopian horrors that once upon a time were projected to be in the future. We have now become what that future is for storytellers. So I say all of this because this future world that Edgar Wright presents to us just seemed very generic to me. Nothing about it truly popped. I did like the slums being outside of the futuristic co-op city, and you have to get through the gate to get into co-op city. I thought that was cool. And the idea that poor people have outdated tech in a world that also has flying camera orbs and floating mailboxes was a nice little wrinkle. But that being said, it didn't really come together to make the world feel real to me. In contrast, um, look at the universal but still specific reality that was subtly depicted in another Bachman adaptation this year, The Long Walk. Go back to my thoughts on The Long Walk if you have not listened to it. If you haven't seen The Long Walk, I strongly recommend it because that was a story that depicted a reality show that people have to participate in at their own physical expense to win money in a dystopian world. That I feel it does it so much better, and it speaks to today in a very, very clear way while still pulling from the text. So the balance that I was looking for in The Running Man is what I found in The Long Walk. I never really like knocking one thing down to raise another thing up, but in this case, I do want to be able to shine a light on something that was successful here. And if you have not seen The Long Walk, because The Long Walk, I do believe, did get drowned out in the anticipation of The Running Man, which, like I said, the marriage of Edgar Wright, who is a commodity within Hollywood, and the rise of Glen Powell, I think, did shine a big spotlight on what this movie was expected to be and expected to do at the box office, and something like The Long Walk, which is less glamorous, doesn't have the same level of superstar wattage power within it. I think that it kind of got a little shunted off to the side because even though they are different, one is far more contemplative by its very nature than the other. They do share similar DNA. Not only are they both written originally by Stephen King around the same time with the pseudonym of Richard Bachman, but they both, like I said, it's about people, normal, everyday people who are forced to endure these physical challenges that are presented to the rest of the world as entertainment um, at their own danger, at their own for their their lives. They're putting their lives on the line at the onset of the beginning of this game. Whether it is The Long Walk, whether it is The Running Man, it is a physical act of endurance, and there is corruption. There are clear rules that are established in how these games must be played. But I feel, like I said, what is established and accomplished within The Long Walk is far more successful and speaks to right now in a way that I feel that the Running Man, it just has that that Tron aspect that I'm saying. It doesn't speak to now. The Bobby character, played by Coleman Domingo, who's great. The performance is great. This idea of this over the top talk show host. I'm not quite sure in an age where we have reality shows as a form of entertainment and TikTok, and apps, and streaming, this idea of a more classic, network styled form of entertainment just seems very outdated. Um, I wonder what would have happened if Edgar Wright took this basic concept and then prognosticated what entertainment might look like in the future. Um, I don't think that basic streaming is the answer, or basic cable, or basic networks. But what does that marriage um, of streaming services and apps, what does that look like in the future? There was a movie that came out a few years ago starring Jake Johnson, written and directed by Jake Johnson. I can't remember the name of it, but it very much has a Running Man theme to it. But the propulsion is, not through reality television, but through the dark web. And this challenge that he activates through the dark web, where he has to then go on the run, where he is being hunted by other people who, are aware of this game through the dark web. And again, I feel like that, to me, very much was in alignment with the Running Man, but spoke to today. And I just think that there was an opportunity to tell a story that felt very much of the year 2025 or 2026 when you're reading this, that it just missed the mark. So on the surface, it's a glossy looking movie. It's well made for sure, but there's no heart to it. There's no larger theme. There's no exploration of what this marriage between entertainment and societal control and government, what that looks like when we are currently living this. We're living this now. Let's unpack this a little bit. Let's pull at this string. Let's pull at this thread and reveal what lies underneath. And that, it's not there, unfortunately. So that's to me the biggest problem, that it doesn't have anything to say, and that the depiction of this dystopian world is very generic, and it doesn't reflect, our world, in a way that I think it needs to. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is the miscasting, and we just got to talk about the miscasting of Glen Powell, who, like I said, is lined up to be the next big thing in Hollywood. He's incredibly charming. He seems, by all means, seems to be a nice guy, and he has star wattage. He's got this charm to him. So to cast him in a role that is designed to be an incredibly angry person, I don't understand. I don't understand that. If the character of Ben Richards is supposed to be an angry person, Glen Powell is not the person that I think should be cast in that role. The role of anger in this movie is important. So that's going back to it. What is this about? This has to be about something, and the anger that you feel because the cards are stacked against you, and the societal and systematic and systemic inequality will result with you not being able to live, and your child will die over something that is it doesn't have to be that way. I can understand the anger Unfortunately, by casting someone who does not seem to be inherently or innately angry, I think that it's a disservice to Glen Powell, and it's a disservice to the movie itself, because to me, I didn't like Ben. The anger, though cerebrally I understand it, watching this character, he was just frustrating me. He doesn't make for a likable character. I personally didn't like Ben, though I understand the intent behind it, because when you're squeezed and you're squeezed and squeezed, what do you expect? For me, rather than that anger, I would have liked more. I think that it would have been more effective, rather than having it be simply anger, but someone who is desperate. That way, I think that you can still clearly touch upon anger, but that desperation that leads someone to have to sign up for the Running Man and these other games, I think would allow for a little bit more sympathy of the character. But again, I don't know why we're casting Glen Powell as the angry guy. I'm not as big on John Bernthal as a lot of people are. There's a one note quality to him, though he is likable, and I take that back. I take that he has the potential to be more than just the one note. His role in The Bear, I think, really shines a side of him that we don't really get to see, where there's much more woundedness. There's much more layers. There's charm there. There's a gravity around him. But most of the time, he's cast because he has a great anger to him. And my God, could you imagine if you put him in this role instead? How much more naturalistic it would have felt, and a level of danger that there would have been and a more propulsion within this movie. I think that this is a movie that would have really benefited from having John Bernthal or even Shia LaBeouf, who has an angry, frustrated side with him, and with him being, on the smaller size of things, there would have been a vulnerability that would come there by having Shia. Walton Goggins, there is a seething rage that exists behind his eyes when he wants to. So I think that he would have been really, really good with that. But for me, Glen Powell, that to me doesn't work. I mean, part of me thinks that, I know that Josh Brolin, who plays Dan Killian, he's older, I think 65, 66, 67, within that range. Part of me just wants to see, think it would have been better if we flipped Glen Powell into the role of the studio executive, and let him use his charm offense as a weapon. Have him be this slimy yet charismatic studio suit, with a $1 million smile and a wink. When you're able to weaponize that, you're gonna want your main character to really punch him in the face. And someone like Josh Brolin, who also stars in another movie you can watch on Netflix, Wake Up Dead Man. He is able to tap into a real anger. So someone like, if Josh Brolin was a couple decades younger, he would have been great in that angry role. But I think that, again, Glen Powell was really miscast here, and I think that he probably would have worked better in the Dan Killian role. Because this to me just it didn't work. And going back to Edgar Wright, that kinetic action, I don't know where it was. There was a couple scenes, there's a couple moments, I'm like, there it is. There's a scene where Ben is in the trunk, and the trunk pops open, and there's this disorienting shot where you think that he's going to fall out of the car. It's very, very well done. There's a scene in the cockpit where it kind of callbacks to probably what he had written for the original script in Ant-Man, where Ant-Man and Yellow Jacket are fighting within the briefcase, but they keep flying up and fighting in the cockpit. That there's some fun stuff there. And the Michael Cera scene is fun, but it doesn't. I expected a lot more from this movie. I had hoped that it's probably actually a movie. And here's another thing: the pacing was really really off for something called The Running Man. It does take a while to get to the actual show, and I understand like you're building the character, you're building the stakes, you're building the reason why he goes into this, but this is probably a movie that would have benefited from en media res, and starting off at a crucial scene later on in the movie and then working backwards. I don't think that this is a movie that needed to be told linearly. And I think that in doing so, you would have been able to make it a bit more propulsive than it was, which by the time The Running Man starts, it's been kind of a drag. And then it aside from a couple scenes here and there, the action itself doesn't live up to the potential of what Edgar Wright had established for himself in previous movies. And then before I conclude, clearly there's an Easter egg there. He goes to Dairy Maine, which it's always fun. So I don't really have much else to say about The Running Man other than it's fun, it's fine, it's okay. At the end of the day, it was a good way to spend a night. But as a Edgar Wright movie, it's not what I would expect. It's not something that I would recommend as an Edgar Wright movie. It's not something I would recommend as a Stephen King adaptation. It's not even something that I would recommend as a Stephen King adaptation about a dystopian future in which people have to sign up for reality television shows to make money. We had quite a year for Stephen King. I've posted a couple things on Instagram and Facebook about 2025 being a real strong year for Stephen King. We had a publication of a new Holly Gibney book with Never Flinch. In February of 2025, we had The Monkey. In June of 2025, we had Life of Chuck. We had The Long Walk in October. We had The Running Man in November. And we had Welcome to Derry, which was huge. So there was a lot to celebrate with Stephen King in 2025. But unfortunately, I feel like early on the flag was planted that this would be the one, and to me it wasn't, unfortunately. But if you have any thoughts on The Running Man, please write into stephenkingcast@yahoo.com, because I want to know how everyone is feeling about it. And if you have some time on your hands, go on over to iTunes and leave a review. And may you have long days and pleasant nights, and I will see you here next time where MOON spells Stephen King Cast.